Let's start with a time-twisting fact. Cleopatra, the last active ruler of Egypt, lived closer in time to the invention of the iPhone than to the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The pyramid was built around 2560 BCE, while Cleopatra reigned in the 1st century BCE, over 2,000 years later. Mind-blowing, right? Today, the Great Pyramid looks sandy and weathered, but in its prime, it was covered in polished white limestone. This made it gleam in the sun and reflect light for miles, like a giant beacon in the desert. Pharaoh Pepi II was said to hate flies so much that he smeared honey on his servants to lure them away from him. Talk about a royal solution to an annoying problem. Bad breath? No problem. Ancient Egyptians invented one of the earliest breath mints. They mixed cinnamon, frankincense, and honey into little pellets to keep their breath fresh. Perfect for impressing the gods or your date. Some pharaohs married their siblings to keep the royal bloodline pure. While this may sound shocking today, it was seen as a divine duty. After all, the gods themselves were believed to marry within their own family. Egyptians worshipped cats, seeing them as protectors of homes and sacred animals of the goddess Bastet. Killing a cat, even by accident, was punishable by death, showing just how deeply they revered these feline companions. The word pharaoh didn't always mean king. It originally meant great house, referring to the royal palace. Over time, it became a title for the ruler himself. Ramses II wasn't just a great pharaoh, he was a great father. He reportedly had over 100 children, making him one of history's most prolific dads. Life as a pharaoh was all about luxury. Tomb paintings show servants fanning rulers with enormous ostrich feather fans to keep them cool and comfortable during the sweltering heat. Here's a strange one. When a family cat died, Egyptians shaved off their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. The grief lasted until their brows grew back. In ancient Egypt, some masters were buried with their servants so they could continue serving them in the afterlife. Thankfully, this grim practice became less common over time and was replaced by shabti figurines, small servant statues meant to magically do the work instead. Believe it or not, the Egyptians had a pregnancy test over 3,000 years ago. Women would urinate on barley or wheat seeds. If the seeds sprouted, it meant pregnancy. Modern science has shown this actually works most of the time. Ancient Egyptians adored their pets. Dogs and cats were common, but some families had baboons, gazelles, and even trained monkeys to fetch fruit or entertain guests. These animals were often mummified and buried with their owners. Board games were popular in ancient Egypt, and one of the most famous was Senet. Played with a grid board and throw sticks, it was a mix of fun and spirituality. Some even believed winning meant safe passage to the afterlife. Most Egyptians lived in simple mud brick houses. These homes kept cool during scorching days and warm at night. But they didn't last forever. Many ancient houses have crumbled away, leaving only foundations for archaeologists to study. One of Egypt's greatest inventions was papyrus, the world's first form of paper. Made from reeds along the Nile, papyrus allowed Egyptians to record history, write letters, and preserve sacred texts thousands of years before modern paper existed. The Tarkan dress is over 5,000 years old, making it the oldest known woven garment in existence. This linen dress shows that fashion mattered even in ancient times, proving style never goes out of date. Ancient Egyptians didn't take tomb robbing lightly. Some tombs were inscribed with curses meant to scare away thieves. These warnings threatened bad luck, disease, or even death for anyone who disturbed the dead. Unlike many ancient societies, Egyptian women could own property, run businesses, and even take legal action in court. Some even became pharaohs, like the famous Hatshepsut, showing that women held real power in Egyptian society. Egyptian doctors were skilled and specialized. Some focused only on treating specific body parts. Evidence shows they even performed early brain surgeries, making them pioneers in medicine thousands of years before modern hospitals. The scarab beetle was one of ancient Egypt's most important symbols. These little creatures represented rebirth and transformation. Egyptians placed scarab amulets in tombs, believing they helped the dead journey safely into the afterlife. Some scarabs were even inscribed with magical spells for protection. The afterlife wasn't all golden fields and paradise. Duat, the Egyptian underworld, was filled with dangerous creatures, fire pits, and terrifying demons. Souls had to pass gruesome challenges before reaching eternal peace. If they failed, they faced total destruction by the dreaded devourer of souls. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, was both feared and revered. She was the goddess of war and disease, said to breathe fire and unleash plagues on her enemies. Pharaohs prayed to her for victory, but when she was angry, she could devastate entire cities with sickness and destruction. Egyptians believed that a person's soul had two parts, the Ba and the Ka. The Ba was a person's personality, while the Ka was their life force. After death, the Ba could travel between the world of the living and the dead, but the Ka needed offerings and rituals to survive in the afterlife. The first mummies weren't created on purpose. In early Egypt, bodies buried in the desert were naturally preserved by the hot, dry sand. When Egyptians realized this, they developed intentional mummification, using oils, resins, and linen wrappings to perfect the process. Medicine in ancient Egypt wasn't just science, it was magic. Heka, the god of magic, was believed to give healing powers to priests and doctors. Many medical treatments included spells and incantations, blending spirituality and science into one. Imagine a statue of a god speaking. In Egyptian temples, priests would whisper into statues, pretending the gods were answering worshippers' prayers. This created a direct link between the gods and the people, making temples powerful centers of spiritual guidance. The deadly Nile crocodile was sacred in ancient Egypt. It was associated with Sobek, the god of strength and protection. Some temples even kept live crocodiles as sacred animals, believing they carried Sobek's spirit. But in the wild, they were still terrifying predators. Egyptians loved cats, and no goddess was more beloved than Bastet. She was the protector of home, family, and fertility, often shown as a gentle cat or fierce lioness. Killing a cat, even by accident, was considered a serious crime. Many Egyptian tombs contained false doors, carved into stone walls. These weren't mistakes. They were meant to let spirits pass between the living and the dead. Families placed food and offerings by these doors, believing their ancestors' spirits would come through and accept them. The ancient Egyptians didn't just worship a handful of gods. They believed in over 2,000 deities. Some gods were well known, like Ra, Osiris, and Anubis, while others were more obscure. Each god had a specific role, from creation to protection, love, war, and even writing. Meet Anubis, the god of mummification and the afterlife. With his jackal head, he guided souls into the next world and oversaw the embalming process. Egyptians believed Anubis protected the dead from evil spirits, and that's why his image appears in so many tombs. One of Egypt's most dramatic legends is the murder of Osiris, god of the afterlife. His jealous brother Set tricked and killed him, cutting his body into pieces. But thanks to his wife Isis, Osiris was magically revived and became ruler of the underworld, while their son Horus avenged him. Ancient Egyptians believed that after death, your heart was weighed against a feather in the hall of judgment. This feather belonged to Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you could enter paradise. But if it was heavy with sin, it was devoured by a terrifying beast. Without Ma'at, they believed the world would fall into chaos. The Eye of Horus is one of Egypt's most famous symbols, representing protection, healing, and power. Egyptians wore it as an amulet, believing it could guard them against evil and illness. Even today, you can still find the Eye of Horus in jewelry and artwork around the world. Every night, the mighty sun god Ra was believed to travel through the underworld, battling demons and the chaos serpent Apophis. If Ra won, the sun would rise again. But if he lost, total darkness and destruction. Thankfully, Ra always triumphed, or so they hoped. Talk about dedication. Egyptian priests had to shave their heads, bodies, and even eyebrows to stay pure before entering temples. They bathed several times a day and followed strict diets to remain worthy of serving the gods. The Egyptians weren't just great builders, they were astronomical geniuses. The temple of Abu Simbel was built so that, twice a year, the sun would perfectly illuminate statues of the gods inside. These solar alignments weren't accidents, they were proof of Egypt's deep connection to the cosmos. To navigate the afterlife, Egyptians believed the dead needed a guidebook, literally. The Book of the Dead contained spells and instructions to help souls avoid demons, pass trials, and reach paradise. Some even had spells to transform into animals or escape traps in the underworld. The Egyptian heat was no joke. That's why ancient Egyptians wore light, breathable linen clothing made from flax plants. It kept them cool in the scorching desert sun and was considered clean and pure, even sacred. Both men and women wore makeup, not just for beauty, but for protection. The black coal around their eyes helped guard against sun glare and infections. It was fashion with function. Ancient Egyptian children often ran around naked until their teens. Clothing was minimal for kids, which made sense in the hot climate. It wasn't weird, it was normal. For hygiene, many Egyptians shaved their heads and wore elaborate wigs. Lice was a problem, and wigs were not only practical, but also a sign of status and style. Beer was a staple drink, even for kids. Made from fermented bread, it was safe to drink, full of calories, and part of daily meals for all social classes. Without sugar, honey was gold, literally and figuratively. Egyptians used it as a sweetener, a preservative, and even as medicine for cuts and infections. Sweet and smart, bread was the main food, but it came with a price. Sand and grit from stone mills often got into the dough. Egyptians ate it anyway, but over time, it wore down their teeth. Ouch! The oldest known love poem was written in ancient Egypt. It's emotional, romantic, and thousands of years old. Proof that love has always been a part of lives even years ago. Egypt had an early version of modern medicine. Doctors specialized in specific body parts, like eye doctors or dentists. Some treatments even combined magic and medicine. Instead of soft pillows, Egyptians used wooden headrests. It may seem uncomfortable today, but it helped keep cool and preserve elaborate hairstyles. Beauty sleep, ancient style.